Good day and welcome to exam-based contact classes for professional and community development. My name is Reginald Dogotola and I'll take you through the preparation for the exams during 2019. The overview of this presentation is that we're going to be looking at the aim of the examination-based contact classes. We then look at general instructions that sometimes students tend to ignore, but that are crucial to you writing a good paper. We'll then also look at common mistakes made in the examination. There are mistakes that students year in, year out tend to repeat, and so we're going to be looking at those. We then look at the unit outlines for the different examination dates. That's April, August, as well as the supplementary for those that will not make it during April or August. And we'll conclude. So the aim of this contact class is always to give guidance to students on how to approach the examination questions as well as the paper. It's also to caution students not to make mistakes, common mistakes in the examination when writing. There are just certain mistakes that students tend to make. So we want to avoid that, and help students to avoid those, and then look at just how do we approach the examination paper. Let's look at the general instructions. Please clearly write your name, ID number, and then the examination center. Those are the basics, but pay attention to your handwriting. If you know that your handwriting is not legible, make an extra effort when you fill in these details to just write clearly and neatly. Please take note of the following instructions. Questions should be answered on the question paper. So you don't write on separate papers. You write on the question paper, there's space provided. There are no optional questions. All questions are to be answered. There are no options. Use the mark allocation for each question as a guide for how many facts are needed. Sometimes a question can be out of 2 and the student can write cut off a page just for 2 marks. Please don't do that. Always look at the mark allocation to guide you as to how many facts you need to put down. Also, if you write too much and spend too much time on certain questions, you get the mark allocated, but you've actually spent more time than is required. So pay attention to the mark allocation to guide you on how much time you spend on each question. Write neatly and legibly. If I can't read it, I can't mark it. Sometimes students, I'm sure they've written the correct answers, but because I can't read it, I cannot mark it. So pay close attention to your handwriting. Also, consider the level of the verb. If you look at your guide, the first few pages, they explain the verbs. And verbs have levels. There's explain, state, describe, outline, all these things. You need to be able to differentiate. When the question says explain versus when the question says describe, what are they asking you to do? When a question says state or mention, what is it that that is expected of the student? Because sometimes students just write. The minute they see the keyword, then they start writing without consideration of the verb. If it says explain, then do explain. If it says describe, if it says outline, mention, compare. So pay very close attention to the verbs and go into your guide, and when you prepare for the exam, let the verbs be part of your preparation. Please, we all know there's no cheating in the exam. Should you cheat and get caught, you know that steps will be taken against you, and that's actually a serious offense. So stay away from the urge to cheat during the exam. Study, prepare, and do your best. So what are these common mistakes that students make in the exam? So let's just look at some of them. I'll also try my best to explain so that you can avoid making these mistakes. The first one, the very first one, is linked to the previous general instruction for you to consider the verb level. So The first common mistake is that students don't even demonstrate understanding of the question. The question can be as simple as name 2 types of communication styles. And then the student would answer the question, teachers are important, teachers must be nice to learners. There is no link between what the student said and the question asked. If you look at this example, we're asking about communication styles. For the student to answer in this way, teachers are important, teachers must be nice to learners, is a demonstration that the student did not, first of all, understand the question. Secondly, the student did not study. Because had you studied, you'd know about the communication styles. So you need to read the question to make sure that you understand what the question requires. It's as simple as if I ask you what is a cup and then you tell me about a plate, I can't give you marks even though what you said about the plate is right, for the mere fact that you did not answer the question. So you need to stay on top of your ball and pay close attention to what the questions are asking you to do. So if it says name 2 types of communication styles, you cannot go off topic. And you will notice that when I mark your assignments, I do indicate for you where you have gone off topic, so that when you get to the exam, you are aware of this common mistake that if you're not careful, you can go off topic. So when you write most of you, when you get your assignments back, you will notice that I'll make the remark like out of topic, no link to question. So this is just to demonstrate to you and to show you and to guide you that you need to pay attention to the question. If you ask, what is a cup? You cannot talk about plates and spoons. You need to talk about the cup. So that's just an example. It seems like a simple enough instruction, but over time I've noticed that students keep making the same mistake, not answering the question. They simply pay attention, communication, and then they start writing. So be very careful and pay close attention to the question. The second common mistake that students make, the student does not demonstrate understanding of the different verbs. As I've said, and I'm going to keep stressing on this, you need to study the verbs in preparation for the exam as well as the assignments. You need to know the difference between describe and explain. You need to understand the word compare, distinguish. These are typical academic verbs that students, it doesn't matter from what institution you are from, doesn't matter what university or higher learning institution you are from, you need to know the basics of academic, and those are the verbs. You need to understand what's explained, what's described, what's mentioned, what's compare, what's distinguish, what is name, mention, list. So you really, really need to pay attention to the verbs. For example, discuss the following factors. It simply means write about something in detail, taking into consideration the different views and ideas. I'm not going to go into the explanation of all the verbs. They are in your guide. They are at the beginning. So please go back to your guide and go through the verbs and understand the verbs so that when you answer questions according to the verb. The verbs also indicate to you how much to write. A question that says explain has more marks as opposed to a question that says mention, because then you just name facts and 1, 2, 3, 1 or 2 sentences. But when it says explain, that means we expect a detailed outline of what is asked. So pay attention to that. It's also very important when you consider the time that you have. You can't afford to waste time during the exam. When it says list, name, state, mention, the 5. So if you look at the first one, the first example, discuss the following factors. And then the second one is list, name, state, mention the 5 factors. And then the third one, the third example is explain the 5 principles. So these are questions asking about the same topic but asking different information. So the way the student answers gives the information should be different based on the verb. The last example is, for example, when you are asked, use examples to illustrate your answer. Most students, I find that they struggle with this. Some questions are very practical, so you would find that I would ask for examples to illustrate your answer. This is usually very good for students that have studied, because even though they cannot remember word by word what the guide said, because they read, they will be able to come up with an illustration. Could be in the form of a story, in the form of a scenario, but they will be able to use this. So when the question is stated, use examples to illustrate your answer, it's usually an opportunity for students to get marks. But you need to understand what the question is asking you to do in order for you to see that it's actually an opportunity for you to get marks. So use examples that answer the questions. That's basically what it means. When it asks, use examples to illustrate your answer, simply means use an example that would answer the question asked. Don't go off and tell stories and then in the end you haven't answered the question. You simply told a story, but it's not anyway linked to the question. So whatever example you give, it should be linked to the question asked. So these are usually opportunities for students. In many cases, we have students that really, when students have studied, you can really see that these are opportunities where they score marks. But unfortunately for students who don't study, these questions become a challenge because you don't know what the topic is about. And always remember that when you use examples, they have to be based on the teaching profession, teaching experience, teaching methodologies. So you need to be able to stay within the framework of teaching. Please try not to go off topic. Okay, talking about verbs, we have differentiate between A and B. Show the differences. There's describe, outline. So when you go through all these explanations of verbs, please note those explanations so that when you do go and write the exam, you have a clear understanding of what the verbs are about. Also, when you get your assignment back, you'll see that I'll make comments with regard to the verbs if you've made mistakes. If you've done well, I'll still make a comment that you're in the right path or give you your marks. But for students who struggle with verbs, please pay close attention to that. If a question says list, describe, or mention, you cannot go on and explaining. Also, another issue when it comes to verbs that I want to outline is when the question, let's say, is out of 4 marks, differentiate between A and B. Usually, a question could be differentiate between a testimonial and a CV. Just an example. Usually, some students would only write about a testimonial. But because the question says differentiate, which means show the difference between A and B, or between a testimonial and a CV, if you only write about a CV, I cannot give you marks because, first of all, you failed to differentiate, and the question says differentiate. So even if you've provided correct information on what a CV is, I cannot give you marks because you failed the basic instructions of the question, which is differentiate. So this is why the verbs become important. So you could write the correct things, but because you did not follow the instructions, you lose out on marks. So pay close attention to differentiation, to the verb levels. One of them being differentiate. Explain. So all these verbs, I can't go into details with them, but please pay close attention to the different verbs. The good thing about you paying attention to the verbs is that the verbs are used worldwide. They are universal. So you're not only studying for this particular exam, but you're also studying and learning for future exams and academic pursuits. So once you understand verbs, your academic career becomes very easy. Most students simply lose marks, not because they haven't studied, not because they don't know what they are writing, but because they don't understand the verb levels. So please pay attention to that. So the fourth mistake we're going to be looking at is students who answer questions with the same statement used in the sentence asking the question. So what do I mean by this? Let me give examples from professional and community development. The question would say, what is professional development? And the wrong answer the student would ask is, it is the development of the profession. The question is, what is professional development? So all the student did was write the question back to me. So is it fair that I give you a mark for writing back what I gave you? It isn't. And it isn't right that you get marks. So what is professional development? That's just an example of what students would then write. It is the development of the profession. Another example, the question would state, what is a profession? And students would write the wrong answer, which is, it is a profession of the teacher. So basically what students would do, they would look at the question and there is no input from their side. They simply restate the question. So often I struggle with this. I'm like, is the student doing this on purpose? So please avoid this. Avoid this because I'm definitely not going to give you a mark. And the memorandum would also state that you should not get a mark when you do such typical mistakes. So let's look at, so enough about the general instructions. Those are basically the general instructions as well as the common errors or mistakes that students are likely to make. Now let's look at what students, all students, whether you're writing in April, August, or you're writing supplementary. For professional and community development, there are certain concepts or terms or definitions that you just need to know as part of the course. Because it says professional and community development, but then you find, despite the fact that the course is called professional and community development, if a question is given in the exam or in the assignment, what is a profession, then you find students can't even answer what is a profession. And those are the basics of the course. The course is called Professional and Community Development. So you must know what a profession and a community development is for you to understand the whole course, the whole content of the course. But then you find that students can't even answer the simple question of what's a profession, what's community development, or what is professional development. So let's look at the basic concepts that all students are expected to master, irrespective of whether they're writing in April, in August, or during the supplementary exam. So the first concept or definition, know what a profession is. The course is called Professional and Community Development. The one would only assume that it's only fair that you should know what a profession and professional development is all about. So know what a profession is, know what team spirit is, know what professional development is, gender disparity, emotional intelligence, whether it's high emotional intelligence or low emotional intelligence. Understand what entrepreneurship is all about. Understand what professionalism is all about. What is a code of conduct? And also very important, many times I find that students would mix up the concept of code of conduct with conduct. Generally conduct. Conduct means behavior, but the code of conduct is basically a concept that you need to master what it is, versus conduct is simply another word for behavior, generally speaking. So you need to pay attention to some of these things, because if a question comes, what conduct is expected of teachers? And then students would write about the code of conduct, which shows that they have not understood the difference between the two concepts. Okay, more concepts to understand. Community development, as we've stated, curriculum vitae. You also need to understand assertive communication. You then also need to understand business plan. Now, the reason why I've put up this concept is that, as you have noticed, that the course, Professional Community Development, the guide is quite thick. And when you prepare for the exam, you are not only preparing for professional and community development, you're also preparing for other subjects. But if you have to study the whole book, that would be unfair on you, because first, time is not on your side, and the book is simply too big for students to master everything. So we've taken out aspects of the course that we're going to be concentrating on in 2019. So this is why we put the concepts there. So it makes it easier for you, not only to prepare for the assignment, but also when you prepare for the exam. When these words come up, you are not shocked or you don't become confused because you don't know what they mean. So once you'd really need to master these concepts that I've just outlined. Moving on, let's look at the April exam, those that are writing in April. Let's look at what you need to avoid. So what you need to avoid and what you need to pay attention to. So what I've done is I've looked at every exam with regard to units. So for the April exam with regard to unit 1 to 7, I've outlined it. Like I said, I have sympathy for students because you don't only write my subjects, you write a whole lot of other subjects, and time is not always on your side. And I understand that most of you are studying part-time, so this makes it very easy. But this is in no way questions for the exam. So these are just guides. So these are just topics that you need to concentrate on. So please do not only concentrate on them as questions, and then when the exam comes, you call me and said, I asked things that were not part of the outline. These are just topics. So in Unit 1 for the April exam, please look at professional roles and responsibilities of teachers as relating to the different aspects, parents, communities, teaching. Please look at those. And as you can see in the guide, there are quite a lot. We do not expect you to know all of them. If you read through them and if you can maybe study, usually less than five or less, and just try to get an idea of what these professional roles and responsibilities are, that would be enough. But then one thing I've also noticed when it comes to professional roles and responsibilities of teachers, when the questions are posed to students, students then mix up. If the question is professional roles and responsibilities of teachers relating to teaching, students would then write responsibilities and roles related to parenting, which would then not give you a mark because you've just spoken of parenting, whereas the question asked with regard to teaching. Whereas also if the question ask about roles and responsibilities related to the community, and then you talk about the roles and responsibilities related to teaching, you don't get marks. So like I said in the very beginning, you need to pay attention to the questions and answer the instructions of the questions. Again, we look at team spirit. It's one of the concepts also that you need to be familiar with. Then you need to understand team spirit in the context of the school setting. Unit 2, we look at professional development and accountability. Please find out what the word accountability means and what it means for the teaching profession. Secondly, look at the development stages of children between the ages of 1 and 18 and how it impacts on learning. I know that in the past, this has been really a challenging question. So, and very few students get it, and this is because this is one of the questions that requires students to use high academic skills. You need to synthesize information. You need to blend information together. Information about the development stages of children as well as learning in children. And so I know that a lot of students do struggle on this, and I can assure you this question will be part of your assignment. It forms part of your assignment. So when you get it for the assignment and you don't get it right, then you need to make sure after you get your assignment back that you find out the correct answers before the exam, because I can assure you it's in both the assignment as well as the exam. But it's how the question is put forward. So it wouldn't be put forward the way it's put forward in the examination, because that would be just a repetition. But you do need to understand the idea of development, growth in children, and the learning aspects, because that is the basics of teaching. You can't teach children things that they are not cognitively prepared for because of their development stage. if you are teaching primary, you can't teach children difficult arithmetic because they have not yet developed the brain power to do that sort of arithmetic. But then you need to understand that as part of your training, that teachers teach according to the development stages of children. So you need to look at child growth and learning and how it relates. So as I said, it's a question about synthesizing. So it is a high academic question. It's not difficult. It simply requires students to put in more thinking. So that's Unit 2. Unit 3, part of the April exam, is looking at professional development opportunities for personal and professional development. Like I said in the beginning, the name of the course is Professional and Community Development. So professional development, you need to understand that concept as well as opportunities for personal and professional growth. You need to understand that there's no way around it. That's the basic of the course. Very, very important, computer-based technology. Teaching, like other professions, uses technology. So there's no way a teacher in the 21st century cannot put in effort to teach themselves about technology. You cannot avoid technology. The children that you teach will know about technology. They are the children born in the computer era. So the technology is very important in every profession. So teachers need to educate themselves on technology. So the course doesn't go deep into technology, but we do want teachers to understand the basics of the importance of technology and its use. So look at computer-based technology. What are some of the various computer-based devices and apps and programs that teachers can use in teaching, that can help in teaching to make it fun and to make it more relevant to children born in the 21st century. It's no more enough for a teacher to stand in front of the class and preach, whereas you can use other aids to help you teach, some computer aids. So it's very important that teachers understand technology. We can't run away from that, because the children that we are interacting with interacts with computer. And if we need to reach them, we need to reach them through technology. It has advantages and disadvantages, so teachers just need to also understand the whole concept of computer-based technology in teaching. Then we look at the challenges of the Namibian teacher. Every country has its own set of problems when it comes to the teaching profession. So what are some of the challenges that the Namibian context presents to teachers? So they are outlined in the guide. Please go through them. I don't want to name any, because if I name some and I don't name others, and then some students might assume that that's all. So I want students to go back to the guide and familiarize themselves with all the challenges within the Namibian context as outlined in the guide. And then parenting. Parenting, as you can see in the first unit, it talks about the roles and responsibilities of teachers with regard to parenting. And then again, Unit 3, we revisit parenting. It's very important that teachers understand the role of parenting and how they play the role with regard to helping parents to parent their children. We know that teachers are parents when the children are at school, but we also know that and understand that the teacher does not take away the roles and responsibilities of parents. We simply complement when it comes to the learning context. So it's very important that we understand parenting so that as teachers we can play a better role of helping teachers, of helping parents to teach their children and to help them within the education setup. Unit 4, we need to look at the roles of educators in addressing poverty. We need to study poverty because poverty is one of the challenges that teachers are presented with within the Namibian context. Some teachers will work in areas that have more poverty than other areas. For example, some teachers would be based perhaps at shanty towns or informal settlements, whereas some teachers will be based at more privileged schools that are based in places where people have easier access to basic services. Teachers, throughout your career, you might be required to work in both setups. So it's very important that even if you're not thinking of working within an informal settlement, that you are aware of the issues that children from informal settlements and parents from informal settlements go through, because we know that there are children that commute from informal settlements to attend schools that are based in urban or more privileged and more affluent communities. So even if you don't work in an informal settlement, you are likely to come across one or two learners from the informal settlement or from a more poverty-stricken community. So how do you approach students, and how do you help students to take advantage of the opportunity of education, even though they are from poverty-stricken backgrounds? So that's a very important role that teachers play. So it's very important that you understand poverty and how it affects learners, and also how education plays a role in poverty eradication or dealing with poverty. Please look at gender disparity. Many times we ask the question, what is gender disparity? As you could see from the concepts and the definitions that I gave, gender disparity is one of those things that all students must understand. Whether you're writing in April, August, or supplementary, you need to understand what is gender disparity. And basically what gender disparity means is, disparity simply means unequal. So this is where boys and girls are not represented equally within the education system. It could be, whereas the book only talks about he and does not mention both sexes. It could be where teachers or the community pays more preferential attention to boys than girls, or vice versa. So if you look in the guide, it's clearly explained, but please know what it is and how it plays a role in the education of children. Very important, we pay a special focus on educating the girl child. So understand, it is because of our background that we are paying attention more to the girl child, but that does not exclude the boy child. But in many times, when it comes to education, the girl child is usually vulnerable and also more likely to be affected by issues that would not allow her to complete her education. Not to say that boys are not affected, but in this case, we pay special focus to the girl child. Look at collaboration, understand what collaboration is, understand what collaboration when it comes to change agents and leadership in the teaching profession is all about. Understand the word change agents, understand how leadership in education plays a role, because sometimes it's like when we talk about leadership, when you ask a question with regard to leadership, it's like students don't connect it to the teaching profession. But as you can see in the book, it's clearly stated that teachers are community leaders. They are experts in their field, and they play a vital role in influencing the rest of the community. And then also look at establishing collaborative relationship with colleagues. Very, very important. Please read through. Unit 5, we're talking about characteristics of high emotional intelligence, the influence of emotional intelligence on professional growth, which is also a question that I've seen in the past that students don't seem to get right. And I think that the fact that they don't understand the influence of emotional intelligence on professional growth is because, in the first place, they have not understood what emotional intelligence is. Once you understand emotional intelligence, you can then link it to teaching as a profession as well as professional growth. So students, read up on that. I know this question is also part of the assignment. It might not be stated the way it is in the assignment for the exam, but please understand the concept and understand the link between emotional intelligence and the teaching profession. Look at assertive communication. Look at all the other communication styles. Moving on to Unit 6. Like I said, understand the curriculum. For April exam, we will not concentrate on the resume. We're only going to look at the curriculum vitae. Interview skills, very important. Do not take this question for granted and say, well, it's interview skills. and not study for it for the exam, because you'll be surprised how many students actually fail this exam. So they assume it's easy, they don't study it, they concentrate on the other things, and then it comes, and then they realize it carries 8 to 10 marks, and they can only write 1 or 2 facts. So pay attention to that. And then the last unit, we're looking at entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, one of the basic questions that was asked in the past from students is, can a teacher be an entrepreneur? And some students said no. Let me make it very clear. Teachers can be entrepreneurs. And what an entrepreneur is a fancy word for business person. So the word entrepreneur simply means business person. So the question is, can a teacher be a business person? So when students answer, no, teachers cannot be business people, then one wonders if they've studied or even understood the word entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship is one of the concepts that I've stated in the beginning, that all students, irrespective of whether you are writing April, August, or SUP, you need to understand. So teachers can be entrepreneurs. The question is how. They can be entrepreneurs within the education field or outside the education field. But for any business, just like any other business person, when you start a business, what are the key questions to ask for that specific business? If you want to start a daycare or a bookmaking business, or you want to be a publisher, story writer, what are some of the questions that you need to ask yourself? So the guide outlines some of the things to consider when you want to open up a business, whether you're a teacher, whether it's within the teaching profession or outside the teaching profession. But you need to know key questions of how to set up a business. And then, as I said in the beginning, teachers can be business people, can be entrepreneurs. So what are the business options within the teaching field? What are some of the options that are open for teachers where they use their teaching expertise? That's basically what the question on the topic is about. What are some of the business options where teachers can use their teaching expertise? So that's when we talk about the education field. Guidelines for starting a business. Like I said, there are factors to consider when you start a business. The reason why entrepreneurship is part of this course is because not all teachers will be employed by government, and not all teachers want to work for government. And some people have a natural tendency to move into business, but teachers might not be aware that they can actually use their expertise in the business field. We know of examples of teachers that are even millionaires and billionaires because they've used their expertise to go into business. So we don't want to limit teachers. Government is not the only employer, and teachers are open for business. Okay, let's look at the August exam. Because I've gone through the April exam, there isn't that much difference. So I'm just going to run through the August exam. And if there are things that I knew that were not in the previous slides, then I might spend more time on them. But basically, you now get a gist of what the exams will be all about. Like I said, also for the April and also for the August exam, professional roles and responsibilities. You need to know that. You need to understand teaching as a profession. One of the basic questions, is teaching a profession? And then you find students saying, no, teaching is not a profession. Well, teaching is a profession. It's one of the professions. We have other professions, doctors, lawyers, police officers. So teaching is a profession. But what is a profession? So there are criteria that are outlined in the guide. Please familiarize yourself with those. And then we look at the code of conduct. Like I said, students do mix up what a code of conduct is, and when the question is asked, what conduct is expected. Remember, conduct is just another word for behavior, but the code of conduct is a special document that outlines the do's and don'ts of the teaching profession. It also talks about what measures can be taken if teachers go against the professional code of conduct. So it's a code, that means it's a set of rules for the conduct or the behavior of teachers. So code of conduct, document that outlines rules, and then conduct itself, the word when it stands on its own, it's about behavior. So I have students mixing up these two words, and usually they lose marks, but I could clearly see that the student has studied, but the student has sort of mixed up the verbs. So please pay attention to that. Like I said in the previous slides also, the development stage or the growth. Sometimes I feel like the word development stages sort of confuse some students. We're basically talking about the growth of children at different ages. So the development stages of children and how it impacts on learning. That's a theme that we're going to sing until students get it right. So try to make sure that you get it right in the exam so that it becomes easier, in the assignment so that it becomes easier in the exam. Unit 3, challenges again of the Namibian teaching context. You need to do that. You need to understand computer. You need to understand computer-based technology and how it impacts or can be used within the teaching profession. That we can't run away from, because the children we are teaching and the students that we come into contact with use technology. Technology is worldwide. And also in your own career and profession, you need to be able to use computer-based technology to make your work easier. Why photocopy papers when you can send students PDF files on their cell phones? Why make copies or spend time typing so many things when you can copy and paste or scan documents? So these are all things that we want teachers to be comfortable with. So you need to understand computer-based technology as well as its use in the teaching profession. Also know the advantage and disadvantage of computer technology so that it helps you to answer some of these questions. Professional development opportunities. Please look at what is professional development and what are the opportunities that are out there for teachers to improve on their teaching skills. Unit 4, collaborative relationships, again with colleagues, very, very important. If we are to create a healthy environment, we need to get along with our colleagues. So read up on that. Poverty reduction again. What is the role of teachers and the teaching profession and the education sector when it comes to poverty eradication or reduction? How does education and poverty relate? How do we approach learners from poverty-stricken environment? We need to understand that whole concept. Health promotion and HIV/AIDS. HIV/AIDS is one of those challenges for the Namibian context. How do we handle it in the teaching profession? How do we handle health promotion and how do we handle HIV/AIDS? We will have learners that are HIV positive and on treatment or not on treatment. We will have sometimes learners that are absent, that are sick, and we need to look out for students and learners. So it's very important that we understand the concept of HIV/AIDS in the education sector. And also, teachers are also affected. So HIV/AIDS is a prominent, it's a crucial issue that we need to understand. Once again, gender disparity, another, just a fancy word for gender inequality or gender disproportional, you know, the unequal representation of boys and girls within the education sector. So it could be that the books talk about he and not she, or it only talks about she, or certain subjects, teachers would treat certain subjects as only for boys. They would encourage perhaps the boys to take science and not encourage the girls to take science. Or a boy child might want to take home economics or a subject that they regard as a girl subject, and the teachers would discourage them. So we need to understand gender disparity, especially in the 21st century where the careers are a bit more fluid between men and women, and boys and girls can basically do anything they want. So the traditional roles are slowly dying out. So how do we move with the time to help learners also to get into the fields that are reserved for the other gender? So it's a whole lot of subject, but we just need students to understand the concept of gender disparity in the education sector. Again, like I said before, a special focus on the girl child. And then we need to understand parenting. The role of teachers and parents are intertwined when it comes to the education field, but there are demarcations. This is the role of the parent, this is the role of the teacher, and they help one another. So it's very important that we understand these different roles and how parenting plays a role in the teaching profession. Okay, moving on to Unit 5, communication styles. We need to understand communication styles. What are they? Name them, understand them. Then we need to understand characteristics of a person with high and low emotional intelligence. This is for the August exam. Please take note, do not mix up the exam. If you're writing in April, just stick to the outline of April. If you're writing August, stick to the one of August. If you're writing SUP, stick to the one of SUP. Like I said, I'm very sympathetic to students because this is not the only subject you're writing. So I can't expect you to cover the whole book. But I do expect you to stick to the outline and understand the topics and stick to those topics. So understand the characteristic of a person with high emotional intelligence and a person with low emotional intelligence, and also understand the link between emotional intelligence and professional growth. How do you use emotional intelligence to become a better teacher? And then, very important, interview skills. Like I said, students have a tendency not to study interview skills because they take it for granted that, well, it's interview skills, it's easy. These are things that are common sense, only for them to get to the exam and they write 1 or 3 things. And they realize that the question is usually more than 8 marks. So please study interview skills, even if you just read through them and you become familiar with them. Unit 7, entrepreneurship. Know what a business plan is, business options in the education field, and guidelines for starting a business. Like I said in the previous slides, a question that was posed in the past to students is, can a teacher be an entrepreneur? And some students said no, teachers cannot be entrepreneurs. Basically, the word entrepreneur just means business person. Can a teacher be a business person? And some students say no, which is wrong. Teachers can be business people. They can do business after hours, after the official working hours. They can do business during weekends. They can run part-time businesses. They can run online businesses. They can run businesses from their homes. So there are no laws against teachers doing business. But then what type of businesses can teachers do within the teaching profession? So we are encouraging teachers to use their professional expertise to do business. For example, publish books, sell educational materials, all sorts of, they are all mentioned. I don't want you to think that the ones that I'm mentioning are the only business options, because the guide does mention a lot of business options in the education field. Not that teachers are limited to the education field. Teachers can do basically any business they want. But the book does outline and focus on options within the teaching profession. So look at that. And then look at guidelines for starting a business. Entrepreneurship is a branch on its own to study how to do business and how to do it well. So please get into that. So that's all for the August exam. Now moving on to the SUP for those that will qualify for the supplementary exam. Once again, the roles and responsibilities of teachers relating to parents, communities, teaching. Please pay attention to that. Teaching as a profession. Look at the code of conduct like I explained. Students tend to confuse code of conduct with conduct. Code of conduct is a written document comprising of rules about the conduct or behavior of teachers, the do's and don'ts of teachers, of teaching, behavior of teachers, as well as the punishment, the punitive, and the rewards for going against or upholding the teaching profession. So a code of conduct is a document with a set of rules. Whereas conduct, the word conduct basically means behavior. So when we talk about a code of conduct, we're talking about a code, which is basically a set of rules, that's what a code is, about the behavior. So code of conduct is set of rules about the behavior of teachers. So please try not to mix up the two terms when it comes to answering questions. And then we look at Unit 1, where we talk about, once again, the development stage or growth of children as it relates to learning. It's very important as a teacher that you understand how the growth of a child from 6 to, or even earlier, 1 year to 18 years, how the different stages of growth of a child impacts on their ability to learn. So you cannot teach a 7-year-old very difficult, complicated arithmetic or mathematics because they haven't yet developed the mental capacity to do that. So what you teach children is informed by their development stage and their capability. So this question is very important, but we find many times that students get it wrong. First of all, because they don't understand the question, and secondly, because it's a question about synthesizing. That means blending together information, two sets of information, the learning of children and the growth of children. So you need to mix it up. So students struggle a bit with that. It's in the assignment. So if you do get to the assignment and you don't know what to do, please call and ask for help. Supplementary exam, Unit 3, look at professional development opportunities. Once again, challenges of the Namibian teaching experience. What are some of the challenges that are contextual to the Namibian setting? Please look at that. Computer, we can't run away from computer-based technology. We need to understand computer-based technology, how we can use it within the teaching setting, and its importance, and its use, and its good and bad. So it's very important that teachers understand computer-based technology. Okay, Unit 4, collaborative relationships with colleagues, very, very important. If we are to create healthy working relationships with our colleagues, we need to understand how relationships in the workplace work and their benefits. Health promotion and HIV/AIDS, very important. HIV/AIDS, like I said, it's one of the challenging issues of the Namibian context. Another challenging issue within the Namibian context is poverty. So like I've stated before, or explained before, some teachers will work in poverty-stricken communities. Some will work in more affluent, more well-off privileged communities. But you don't concentrate only on understanding children from well-off families or understanding only children from poverty-stricken families, because children commute. They might live in one neighborhood or one community and go to school in another neighborhood. So you cannot assume because the school is in academia that all the learners at that school are from privileged backgrounds. Some are maybe being taken care of family members that are not their biological parents. Some commute from the informal settlement. So some might live in that area but might have financial difficulties at home. So these are things that teachers need to be aware about, because this also informs what type of homework you give, what type of information you share with students, and also your level of sensitivity towards students from different backgrounds, and how you encourage and motivate them to concentrate on their school, and also how to guide them on how to overcome challenges. So poverty reduction is a theme in the teaching profession that we need to take seriously. Also, gender disparity, like I've mentioned a couple of times now. Gender disparity simply means gender disproportion or gender inequality. I'm a bit careful to use the word inequality, because it's more about disproportion, which is unequal, but it's more about the representation of boys and girls within the education field, whereas one gender is preferred over another gender, or children are pushed into a certain field of study based on their gender and not based on their intellectual capabilities. So we need to look at gender disparity in the education field, and then there's a special emphasis on the girl child. Not that we shouldn't focus on the boy child, but there are things that teachers need to be aware when it comes to the girl child. Unit 5, communication styles, very important. We need to understand communication styles, to name them and to also have an understanding of what each of these communication styles are really all about. Interview skills. Like I said before, students in the past have not studied interview skills, only for them to discover that interview skills carry a lot of marks and they couldn't really explain a lot of the interview skills that were required. The last unit, entrepreneurship. Like I said, teachers can be entrepreneurs, which simply means teachers can be business people. They can be business people using their education expertise, or they can be business people outside the field of education. Teachers can basically go into any business of their choice. It's very important that we understand that not all teachers will be employed by government, or not all people who study teaching want to actually stand in front of the classroom. There might be other options that they want to explore, like business, making toys, educational material, consultant, and so forth. So there are a lot of business options in the guide. Please go look at that. The ones I mentioned are not the only ones. So I'm careful to mention any here because I want students to go back to the guide and to read up on these educational options. Also, guidelines for starting a business. Entrepreneurship, we know it's a branch on its own. It's a field of study on its own. So it's very important that teachers understand entrepreneurship and things to consider before starting a business. So that is all for the exam outline for both April, August, and supplementary. Now, let's conclude. First of all, like I've said repeatedly throughout this presentation, study the verbs in the guidebook. Study the verbs in the guidebook. Explain, describe, outline, distinguish, compare. Just have a good understanding of those. And you're not only studying for this subject when you study the verbs, but you're studying for your whole academic career. Know the definition of keywords. I've set out all the keywords that I need students to understand for 2019. So, please understand the key concepts, because if a question has to do with one of those key concepts and you do not understand the key concepts, then you cannot answer the question. So pay attention to the key concepts. Study and study to understand. Institutes of higher learning are more about training the mind. It's not really about how much you can memorize. And yes, you can memorize if you choose to memorize, but most times you see the way the questions are set, they require you to demonstrate understanding. So it's not enough to memorize. You need to demonstrate understanding of what the question is asking you. In preparation for your exam, for your examination, please revise your assignments. Do revision, go through your assignment, make sure, because there will not be a question in the exam that did not form a topic in the assignment. No surprises. So all the questions within the exams are based on the topics that were asked in the assignment. Not the questions, the topics. Read the questions carefully before you start writing. Like I said in the very beginning, one of the common mistakes or errors that students make is that they see a word in a question and they just jump and start writing without fully understanding what the question is asking of them. So read the questions, understand the question, and then you can answer. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best for your exam. And yep, that's it. Thank you very much.